Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is created purely for entertainment, storytelling, and dramatic exploration. What you are about to read is not a political endorsement, not a real transcript, and not an actual broadcast, but a crafted, narrative interpretation of a clash in personality, tempo, and temperament. What happens when a television host who has built her entire career on sharp comebacks, witty jabs, and the kind of rapid-fire delivery that keeps guests off balance, finally encounters someone who simply cannot be moved by noise? Someone who does not speed up just because the cameras are rolling, who does not raise his voice simply because the audience expects tension, who does not confuse intensity with intelligence. What happens when a host who equates interruption with control meets a guest who understands that silence, when used deliberately, can be more unsettling than any shouted argument? Imagine a studio lit bright enough to reveal every shifting expression, every twitch of irritation, every attempt to mask frustration. The host sits forward, hands clasped, prepared to dominate the conversation as she has done countless times before. The producers, watching from behind the glass, expect the usual rapid exchanges, a heated back and forth, maybe even a viral clip born from a moment of verbal chaos. But today is different. Today's guest is a man who approaches conflict the way some people approach fine arts, lowly, patiently, with full awareness of every detail unfolding in front of him. Enter Senator John Kennedy, a man whose soft Southern drawl often leads people to underestimate him before he said even 10 words. His accent is gentle, his tone mild, his speech paced like someone strolling along a quiet road rather than sprinting through a debate. To the untrained ear, he sounds relaxed, almost casual, as though he's telling a neighborly story on a porch swing, rather than participating in a nationally televised interview. But beneath that calm exterior lies a mind that functions with razor-sharp precision, a mind that observes, analyzes, and waits for the perfect moment to speak. The host begins exactly as expected, fast, aggressive, pushing the tempo as though speed itself is a form of dominance. Questions overlap. Follow-ups interrupt the initial question. The intent is clear. Keep him reactive, keep him on defense, keep him moving at a pace that is not his own. She leans forward with the confidence of someone who has used this technique successfully for years. Someone who knows that if she controls the rhythm, she controls the conversation. But Senator Kennedy does not take the bait. Instead, he listens, really listens. He watches her quietly, letting her words stack on top of one another until they form not a trap for him, but for her. And when she finally pauses long enough for him to respond, he doesn't lunge into his answer. He doesn't match her speed. He doesn't raise his voice to compete with hers. He simply speaks the way he always does, slowly, evenly, and with the type of intentional cadence that makes every sentence sound like a thesis he has spent years refining. The host becomes visibly unsettled. She interrupts again, trying to recapture footing, but he does not budge. He pauses politely, waits for her to finish, then resumes his sentence exactly where he left off, as though the interruption were nothing more than a breeze passing through an open window. The studio audience senses the shift. The producers sense it. Even the host, beneath her practiced expressions, senses it. Control is no longer aligned with volume. Control has moved to the person who refuses to be rushed. Because the quietest voice in a room is often the one people end up leaning in to hear. And that is exactly what happens. The viewers lean in. The host leans in. The tension does not come from shouting or conflict, but from the startling realization that the usual playbook has completely failed. The host tries to regain ground by shifting topics abruptly, hoping a sudden change will unsettle him. She tries humor, sarcasm, quick pivots, every conversational tactic in her arsenal, but each time, Senator Kennedy answers with the same unshakable calm. His phrasing is simple, almost disarmingly so, yet layered with meaning. His anecdotes feel folksy on the surface, but carry barbs sharpened by experience. His quiet confidence stands in stark contrast to her rising frustration. And then it happens, the moment this interview will be remembered for. Not a loud argument, not an explosive outburst, but a single, devastating exchange in which the senator dismantles the premise of her question with such clarity, such unhurried precision that the host momentarily forgets to speak. Her smile falters. Her eyes flicker. The studio falls silent. It is not humiliation, not defeat, but the unmistakable realization that she has lost control, not because she was overpowered, but because she underestimated the man sitting across from her. This is the kind of moment that becomes legend in the world of televised interviews, not because of scandal, but because it overturns assumptions people didn't even know they were making. A man whose mild demeanor is often mistaken for simplicity reveals the weight of his intellect. A host who relies on momentum discovers what happens when momentum meets immovable calm. What you are about to witness, therefore, is not just another political interview that becomes tense. It is not just another moment of live television confrontation where two people clash over ideas. It is not merely a disagreement, nor a clash of opinions broadcast to millions. This is the moment when Senator John Kennedy, whose Southern drawl disguises one of the most strategic minds in Washington, whose genial manner hides a wit sharper than it first appears, whose slow pace of speech causes people to misjudge him again and again, reminds the world of something very simple and very powerful. Real power does not need to shout. Real confidence does not need aggression. And sometimes the most crushing response to mockery is simply refusing to be mocked. When The View booked Senator Kennedy for their morning broadcast, the producers thought they knew exactly what they were getting. They had seen the pattern countless times before. A political guest brought into a studio environment designed to be fast, punchy, and confrontational. Most politicians reacted in predictable ways. Some grew defensive under the pressure. Others dodged questions until the segment ran out of time, and a few became so visibly frustrated that the resulting clips ricocheted across social media within minutes. The show thrived on those moments, the ones that could be edited into 30-second montages with bold captions and dramatic music. Joy Behar, one of the most outspoken and assertive personalities on the panel, came into the studio that morning with her strategy sharpened. She had researched, rehearsed, and prepared lines she believed would expose the senator as someone hiding behind charm and simplicity. She expected hesitation. She expected confusion. She expected him to struggle when pressed. What she did not expect was the quiet, steady refusal to be rushed that would eventually flip the entire interview dynamic. Joy's plan hinged on underestimating him. She intended to mock his intelligence gently enough to seem like teasing, but sharply enough to unsettle him. She intended to treat his mannerisms, his slow cadence, his gentle drawl, his deliberate pauses, as affectations rather than traits. Her goal wasn't to ask genuine questions. It was to frame every answer he gave as incomplete, unclear, or evasive. If he spoke slowly, she would reinterpret it as stalling. If he used humor, she would call it deflection. If he tried to pause and think, she would interrupt and declare he wasn't keeping up. What Joy Behar framed as asking tough questions was, in Senator Kennedy's view, and in the view of anyone watching closely, an attempt to perform superiority. It wasn't about challenging ideas, but about diminishing the person offering them. It wasn't journalism, it was theater. And it was theater designed to make only one side look foolish. But Senator Kennedy's communication style was something Joy had not practiced for and did not respect. She believed faster was smarter. Louder was more authoritative. Sharper was more impressive. She mistook speed for substance, volume for confidence, and quick comebacks for wit. What she failed to recognize was that Kennedy's slow, intentional way of speaking was not a flaw to exploit, but a strategy honed over years in public life. His pauses were not hesitations, they were calibrations. His pacing was not evidence of confusion, it was proof of how carefully he measured the impact of each phrase. His drawl, so often misinterpreted as a sign of simplicity, was simply how he spoke. It had no connection to the complexity of the ideas behind his words. While Joy prepared jokes, Kennedy prepared meaning. While Joy rehearsed zingers, he rehearsed clarity, and that difference, between speaking to be heard and speaking to be understood, became the silent battlefield of the interview. When the cameras turned on, Joy launched straight into her opening salvo. Her voice rose and fell dramatically, her eyebrows lifted, her tone shifted with each question. She interrupted frequently, pivoted rapidly, and attempted to force the conversation into a rhythm she knew well. Kennedy did not participate in that rhythm. He did not match her pace. He did not raise his voice, tense his posture, or attempt to push back with the same intensity she was using. Instead, he paused, looked at her, waited for her to finish, and then he answered in his slow, deliberate voice, one word chosen carefully after another. When she interrupted, he stopped speaking. When she finished, he continued exactly where he left off, not flustered, not angry, not shaken. His composure became its own form of resistance, the kind Joy could neither interrupt nor outmaneuver. The more she pushed, the calmer he became. The more aggressively she attempted to corner him, the more effortlessly he stepped out of the frame she was trying to build. It was not defiance but discipline, it was not combat but control, and it caused a subtle but unmistakable shift in the room. This moment wasn't about whether political guests should face scrutiny. Of course they should. It wasn't about whether interviewers should ask hard questions. They should. Public office demands accountability, clarity, and the ability to defend one's positions, but there is a significant difference between legitimate challenge and performative mockery, between seeking understanding and seeking humiliation, between probing someone's viewpoints and simply trying to label them as unintelligent before they've said anything. That difference became clearer with every passing minute. Kennedy never attacked, he never insulted, he never retaliated with personal jabs. Instead, he dismantled assumptions with calm logic and well-timed pauses. His responses weren't flashy, but they were devastating in their clarity. At one point, when Joy attempted another mocking interruption, he paused, waited, and then simply said something so quietly and matter-of-factly that the studio fell silent. It wasn't a punchline. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply unmistakably confident. Joy had expected a man she could turn into a punchline. She had expected someone who would stumble under pressure. She had prepared zingers, hoping to create a viral moment where she delivered the knockout line. What she hadn't prepared for was a guest who couldn't be knocked off balance because he refused to step into the ring she had imagined. This wasn't about politics. It wasn't about ideology. It wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was, at its core, about communication, about the power of calm over chaos, deliberation over speed, and substance over spectacle. And in that arena, it became clear that Joy's strategy, built on mocking cadence rather than analyzing content, was no match for someone who understood that real authority doesn't require performance. The interview, meant to be a showcase of rapid-fire questioning and high-energy exchanges, instead became a quiet masterclass in the strength of measured speech, a reminder that not all intelligence announces itself loudly, and a moment in which the assumption that faster is smarter dissolved in real time, on live television. Joy Behar believed she was walking into an easy victory that morning, a routine moment of televised sparring where she could demonstrate her wit, assert dominance, and craft the kind of viral exchange that would keep social media buzzing for days. She had already decided the shape and outcome of the interview before Senator Kennedy even took his seat. In her mind, he was an easy target, a man with a slow drawl, a calm demeanor, and a reputation for speaking in a style that didn't match the rapid-fire rhythm of daytime television. She equated that slowness with softness, that quietness with weakness, as though a measured speaker must automatically be a confused thinker. But what she was actually demonstrating, even before the first question, was something very different, the idea that some people confuse speaking fast with speaking well, that rapid delivery is often mistaken for intellectual sharpness, even when it's just noise dressed up as confidence. That mockery, no matter how polished or clever it sounds, is not the same as insight, and that sometimes the person being dismissed as a joke is quietly observing, analyzing, and preparing to respond with a precision far more powerful than any quick comeback. Senator John Kennedy had been underestimated many times in his career. He had faced down prosecutors, navigated contentious Senate hearings, questioned Supreme Court nominees, and managed the political labyrinth of Washington with a calmness that unnerved his most outspoken opponents. He was not new to confrontation, nor was he easily rattled. His slow cadence was not a crutch, it was a weapon, a method, a style forged from experience and honed by years spent choosing every word with intention. So when he sat down across from Joy Behar, he knew exactly what kind of interview he was stepping into. He recognized the strategy immediately: disrupt his rhythm, mock his style, frame him as unprepared or uninformed before he even had the chance to speak. He had seen it before: hosts who performed confidence instead of practicing it, interviewers who relied on sarcasm instead of analysis, commentators who sought applause instead of understanding. Joy's approach was not surprising. It was predictable. What unfolded on that stage was not just a political interview, and not just a disagreement between two public figures. It became something else entirely: a demonstration of how real intelligence functions when confronted by someone relying more on performance than substance. It became a quiet masterclass in composure, in strategy, in the art of letting someone talk themselves into a corner. Kennedy didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to fire back with insults. He simply allowed Joy's assumptions to become her own undoing, because real confidence doesn't panic. It doesn't speed up. It doesn't scramble. Real confidence is patient. It is steady. It waits for the moment when the right words, spoken at the right pace, dismantle not just an argument, but the foundation of the mockery built around it. Buckle up. Because what you're about to witness isn't just a clash of personalities. It's a reminder that sometimes the slowest speaker in the room is not struggling to keep up. They're giving everyone else time to catch up. And underestimating someone like that is often the last mistake made before they politely, calmly, and methodically reveal just how incorrect those assumptions were. The atmosphere inside the View studio that morning hummed with the same familiar energy the show carried every weekday. The audience clapped as Senator Kennedy's name was announced, not with wild excitement, but with the respectful, polite applause given to a public figure who wasn't there to promote a movie or show a behind-the-scenes clip. He wasn't a Hollywood star. He wasn't a social media sensation. To many casual viewers, he was just another politician sitting down to discuss whatever national issue had dominated the week's headlines. As he walked on stage, the camera panned to Joy Behar, who greeted him with a smile that looked pleasant only from a distance. Up close, and to anyone paying attention, it was the smile of someone who had already written the script for how the next 10 minutes would go. She had prepared her jabs, polished her one-liners, and rehearsed the rhythm of her interruptions. Her goal wasn't connection. It wasn't exploration. It wasn't understanding. It was entertainment crafted at her guest's expense. To Joy, the interview was not a dialogue. It was a performance stage, a platform where she could show the audience her sharp humor, her quick wit, and her willingness to challenge a guest she viewed as intellectually outmatched. She leaned forward with the confidence of someone who believed she already had the upper hand, as though the battle had been won before the first question was even asked. What she didn't realize, what she couldn't have predicted, was that the slow drawl she intended to mock was not a signal of confusion, but a signal of control. She didn't recognize that the deliberate silence she planned to interrupt would become the very thing that unsettled her rhythm. And she certainly didn't foresee that the man she approached as a punchline was quietly, calmly, several steps ahead of her. The interview hadn't even started, and the stage was already set for a dramatic shift neither the host nor the audience anticipated. While Joy prepared to entertain, Kennedy prepared to dismantle, not aggressively, not theatrically, but with the patient precision of someone who has spent his life being underestimated, and has learned exactly how to turn that underestimation into advantage. Before we dive into this story, it is worth noting that what you are about to read is a narrative reconstruction, a dramatic interpretation of a moment on live television, intended for storytelling purposes. It is not a verbatim transcript, nor is it meant to comment on political ideology, policy, or personal character. Instead, it is an exploration of dynamics, of communication, strategy, perception, and power, and how those dynamics unfold when two very different personalities collide on a public stage. What happens when a television host, whose career has been built on rapid-fire comebacks, sharp retorts, and an ability to keep guests off balance, finally meets someone who refuses to be rushed, rattled, or distracted? What happens when a person who equates volume with authority encounters a guest who understands that sometimes the quietest voice in a room carries the heaviest weight? It is in that meeting that the conventional rules of talk, show confrontation, are appended. where expectation meets calculation, and where preparation meets patience. Imagine the studio, bright lights, camera operators moving quietly, a small but attentive live audience, and the familiar buzz of a morning television set. The audience has been primed for drama, for a clash, for the kind of viral moment that will be discussed for days. The host, experienced, confident, and accustomed to dominating the conversation, sits poised with a notebook full of questions and strategies. She knows the power of interruption, the effectiveness of a raised eyebrow, a well-timed sarcastic comment, and a voice that conveys certainty even when the content is debatable. This is the environment she knows, the one she has controlled for years. Then enters the guest, a Southern senator whose calm drawl, deliberate pacing, and unhurried demeanor initially suggest someone unprepared for the high-octane atmosphere of live television. To the untrained eye, he might appear relaxed, almost casual, as if he has no stake in the rapid-fire exchange about to unfold, but appearances can be deceiving. Every pause he takes, every word he chooses, and every subtle gesture is intentional. Beneath his folksy exterior lies a mind attuned to strategy, observation, and measured response. He has navigated the complexities of Washington for years, debated judges, faced scrutiny from multiple angles, and learned the art of staying composed under pressure. Joy Behar, as one of the primary hosts of the show, had clearly prepared for this encounter. Her strategy, refined through experience and research, involved framing the guest as someone whose demeanor masked a lack of substance. She intended to question his intelligence, highlight the supposed oddities of his Southern drawl, and treat every deliberate pause as hesitation or weakness. Her plan relied on speed and assertiveness, tools she had used successfully against numerous previous guests. She equated a rapid response with cleverness and sarcasm with insight. In her calculation, this was a straightforward approach: dominate the conversation, elicit a reaction, create viral content, and entertain the audience. Yet what Joy failed to account for was the guest's mastery of patience and his understanding of human perception. Where she saw hesitation, he recognized an opportunity. Where she expected flustered responses, he intended calm, measured answers. Where she assumed he would be caught off guard, he had already mapped out every potential challenge, ready to respond with precision and clarity. The dynamic she relied on, momentum, speed, volume, was neutralized the moment he chose not to play by her rules. In that refusal, he held the power. From the outset, the interview was structured for confrontation. The host opened with pointed questions, delivered with a practiced blend of humor and skepticism, intended to provoke and unsettle. She interjected frequently, pivoted between topics rapidly, and attempted to control the rhythm of the discussion. In her mind, the conversation's pace equaled her control, and control equaled authority. She believed that any moment of pause or slow response could be exploited to highlight weakness, but the senator, unflustered, allowed her words to fall into the background while he maintained a rhythm of his own, a rhythm not dictated by urgency, but by careful deliberation. His responses were precise, deliberate, and fully composed. He spoke slowly, enunciating each word, not as a sign of inability or lack of preparation, but as a reflection of strategic communication. Each phrase was constructed to be meaningful, each pause calculated to allow both the audience and the host time to absorb the weight of his words. In a setting designed to reward speed and sharpness, his methodical pace became an unexpected demonstration of authority. It became a subtle yet profound lesson in how true composure and intelligence present themselves. As the interview progressed, the host's strategy began to unravel. Her attempts to dominate the conversation, to catch the senator in a misstep, were countered not with aggression, but with calm deflection and articulate answers. Each sarcastic jab or feigned misinterpretation she introduced was met with measured, carefully chosen responses. Her reliance on performative superiority, interruption, rapid questioning, mockery, gradually revealed its limitations. It became clear that intelligence, patience, and confidence are not measured in decibels or speed, but in clarity, timing, and strategic restraint. The audience, initially expecting a dramatic clash, experienced a shift in tone. Where anticipation had been for confrontation, the unfolding exchange revealed something subtler, more powerful, a demonstration of communication as a tool for control and understanding. Real authority, the interview illustrated, does not need volume. Genuine confidence does not rely on aggression or rapid-fire attacks, and sometimes the most devastating response to mockery is not a counterattack, but quiet composure combined with the strategic dismantling of assumptions. This was not just an interview about policy or ideology. It was a lesson in perception, strategy, and the dynamics of human interaction. It was about the difference between performative aggression and true deliberation, between mockery and insight, and between hastily constructed arguments and carefully reasoned ones. It was about what happens when a seasoned individual, underestimated because of mannerisms, proves that skill, patience, and measured confidence can transform an anticipated spectacle into a demonstration of mastery. By the conclusion of the segment, it was evident to anyone watching closely that the host's preparation, carefully crafted jabs, humor, and assertive questioning, had not produced the intended outcome. The guest had not only navigated the questions with composure, but he had also subtly highlighted the assumptions underpinning her approach. The dynamic of control had shifted quietly, but undeniably. In doing so, he provided a clear reminder. Underestimating someone based on style or pace can be a critical error, and the slowest, calmest voice in the room often carries the most influence. In the end, the exchange was more than a television moment. It became a reflection on the essence of communication, that the choice of how and when to speak can be as powerful as the content of what is said, that calm observation can outmaneuver hasty provocation, that patience can trump performative cleverness, and that, sometimes, the most effective form of mastery is quiet confidence, the kind that dismantles assumptions, commands attention, and leaves a lasting impression without ever raising its voice.